Biden administration is now giving illegal migrants work permits and ID cards. I don't know what gives them the authority or the power to do any of that stuff. Joining me now to talk about it, Missouri Senator Mr. Eric Schmitt. Senator Schmitt, thank you, sir, as always. Look, I'm reading about these work permits and ID cards and other things that incentivize crossing the border. What gives them the authority to do that? There's no congressional legislation that says go on ahead and change the laws regarding work permits or visas or any of that stuff. Do you know? Does anybody know? Or are they just doing this?
They're just doing it, and it's part and parcel of a really lawless administration, particularly when it comes to the border, Larry. I mean, we can talk about all the other things that have been struck down, like the student loan debt scam, a lot of the Green New Deal initiatives that were never passed by Congress that they're trying to do by way of administrative state. The courts have weighed in and said you can't do that. But they've just sort of taken this initiative. They also are ignoring their constitutional duty to secure the border. And what did he do when he came in office? He tried to get rid of Remain in Mexico, which was working under President Trump, get rid of Title 42, which was working under President Trump. He was actually paying contractors to not construct the wall. I mean, he literally had materials rusting on the ground. So this is very intentional, and it's disturbing. I think the American people are seeing every day now. We're seeing record border crossings. You know, I've been down there a couple of times. And one of the more startling numbers I've heard, Larry, is that $100 million a week, that's the economic value of the human trafficking alone. Just the human trafficking, let alone the drug trafficking, which, of course, fentanyl's killing over 200 people in the United States per day. That's like a 737 going down every single day. So this administration, it lays at their feet. It's a total disaster at our border, and it's a mess. It's a total mess.
See, Senator, I'm tracking with you on the points, but it just occurs to me, and I forget where I read this. Somebody wrote a good column or a good news report on this. Handing out IDs or worker permits, this is the purview of the House and the Senate. Administration can't just give away this stuff. This has financial implications, economic implications. It has national security implications. I mean, what gives them the authority? This is the administrative state. Vivek Ramaswamy was just, this is central planning at its worst. But mostly, and you did mention student loans, it's like that. You know, mostly they don't have the authority to make these changes.
Right, and in my maiden speech on the Senate floor, Larry, this year, the two things I mentioned specific were we have to fundamentally dismantle the administrative state, and we have to protect free speech, and we see the attacks on that. But as relates to the administrative state, the founders never envisioned this, right? They thought branches would jealously guard their power. They dispersed power so that no one branch or person ever got too powerful. What we've seen now is a supercharged administrative state that just does what it wants to do, and there need to be structural reforms. I propose legislation that would say, look, if you're going to propose a new rule, you got to pull back 3. Not only would you pull back 3, it would get these bureaucrats that, think twice about ever considering moving forward that new rule. Also, Congress should have to weigh in on these matters before the rule goes into effect. If you've got a rule that's going to have an economic impact, Congress should have to give it an up or down. And by the way, Congress is, screwed this up over the years too. They say, look, I voted for this great bill, but I can't believe what the EPA is doing. Nonsense. We got to get back to real accountability so the people who elect us can hold us accountable for our votes. We should have to vote on if there's going to be a gas stove ban. We should have to vote on these ridiculous emissions rules that are strangling our economy. So all of us should have to cast those votes. We have to do something to dismantle this administrative state that's way out of control now and just doing what it wants to do. And thankfully, we've got the courts eventually that step in and knock these things down because they're wholly unconstitutional or go beyond any authority Congress has given them. But ultimately, Congress, the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, we've been tasked by the people of this country, we the people, to say, we want you to decide these things, right? And then you can hold us accountable. Nobody knows who the Deputy Undersecretary of Name the Agency in Washington, D.C. is, and that's part of the problem.
Senator, let me, by the way, on that point, the judge down in Louisiana is overturning the freeze on the Gulf of Mexico oil leases. So the courts are working. I mean, they're doing their job. But you're right. The Senate and the House should be involved in these various laws, whether it's migrants or whether it's student loans or whether it's energy. You're absolutely right. Let me ask you something else. On Thursday, Senator Schmitt, the House impeachment inquiry is officially launched, okay, the Oversight Committee and Jamie Comer. But in the news over the weekend and today, it's very interesting to me, it turns out that Hunter Biden, go back to this, Hunter Biden, I'm going to take some more time with Senator Schmitt here. Hunter Biden did not pay his back taxes. So, and I'll ask you, you're a former Attorney General of the state of Missouri, because he didn't actually pay the taxes, the statute of limitations, so-called, may not apply. And it may be up to special counsel David Weiss, who still could redeem himself and go to heaven if he does things correctly. And another point I wanted to make, speaking of heaven or hell, Hunter Biden has never been really tried for violating the Foreign Agent Registration Act, FARA. And that investigation could uncork, if you will, the entire nasty story of all these, phony LLCs and the $20 million or the $40 million or the $50 million that may have gone into the Biden family, and some of it may have filtered up to President Biden. In other words, my point is there's openings here that the Hunter Biden case on the laptop in Wilmington, Delaware, there's still a chance of opening up this entire scandal. What do you think about that? Does Weiss have the authority?
Yeah, and look, whether it's a conspiracy charge that could be brought, look, as a prosecutor, you know very well, or it would be malpractice to not be aware of the deadlines, the statute of limitation deadlines. And so if they ran on purpose, that's a story, and why. And that's, again, why this impeachment inquiry is so important, I think, to have these facts out in the open for the public to see. You also, anybody knows that when you have a high-ranking political figure like this, these issues, the idea that Weiss had full autonomy here, he would have had to move forward with Maine Justice. Maine Justice is going to sign off on something this sensitive, and so that needs to be pursued. Merrick Garland, his testimony last week, it was a bunch of dancing. He didn't answer anything. It was almost like he just didn't want to commit perjury. And so that's another reason why we have to have a full inquiry here, to have all these facts out there. Once they get the bank records, and they got some of them, Larry, that's going to tell you if the big guy got his cut or not. And the American people deserve to know whether or not Joe Biden, when he was vice president or after or whatever, was in on this. If you think about the implications about a compromised president, whether it was, money from China, money from Ukraine, money from Russia, making national security decisions, this has huge implications. And the best evidence of all of this, Larry, is the video of him bragging, I guess he couldn't help himself, to basically say, you're going to fire the prosecutor, which, by the way, was a problem for his son and his company as you newly established on this board. You're going to fire this prosecutor, or we're going to hold back $1 billion worth of loan guarantees. He's bragging about it, and then he uses, well, son of a gun. What did they do? So this needs to be fully explored. This isn't just about Hunter Biden. It goes all the way to the White House. And again, the American people deserve answers.
So right after Merrick Garland testified before Jim Jordan and the Judiciary Committee last week, 2 more senior IRS agents stepped up and said, wait a second, Justice Department interfered with the investigation. All right, on taxes, the Justice Department interfered. Now, we already had 2 whistleblowers from the IRS, so these are 2 more. So 2 plus 2, even in this woke world, equals 4 IRS whistleblowers saying the same thing, that Merrick Garland did not speak the truth. He interfered with the prosecution of Hunter Biden on taxes and other matters. That's just right out there. So I'm just saying this thing has to be, prosecuted in Wilmington and in Washington, D.C., maybe in California, too. I don't know that. But I'm just saying there's a lot more work to be done. And I just want to get your thought on it, because the inquiry opens up, again, it opens up this week. It's going to open up on Thursday.
Well, that's right, Larry, and I think you saw after that bogus sweetheart plea deal fell apart when the judge thankfully asked some questions about whether or not this was going to give blanket immunity for Hunter Biden for all this stuff other than gun charges that nobody really is talking about. That unraveled this. Now the public is focused on this. They have to look at these other, criminal charges and investigations. The impeachment side, that's a political inquiry. And again, whether they call it an impeachment inquiry, a further oversight inquiry, the American people deserve to know. And these whistleblowers, coming forward, some have been forward. There have been many that have been behind the scenes coming forward. All that needs to be out there. American people can make their decision. The House can make their decision. But I think it's important for our republic, for a real public airing of this stuff.
One last one, Senator Schmitt. You know I love having you. I'd go 40 minutes with you, but one last one. You're going to have we headed for a government shutdown, I guess Friday at midnight. We're going to head for that?
I'm hopeful we don't. It seems unnecessary, but I will say this. This is my first year in the Senate, and I will tell you, I am shocked that all of the discussion about deadlines and never about dollars, states everywhere in this country pass budgets through individual appropriation bills. We ought to be able to weigh in on these bills one by one, offer amendments. We might be able to focus on one as opposed to the other. We've got to get back to that kind of regular order, and we've got to take away the incentive structure to come back to this deadline mentality where, quite frankly, a few people hold a lot more cards, and it always ends up costing the American taxpayer a lot more money, and that is not the best way to run a railroad. It's certainly not the best way to run Congress. So I'm hopeful we can get some reform as we move this forward, too.
Listen, I've been yelling and preaching about a regular order for so long. I understand Schumer wants to spend more, and then you got House Republicans that want to spend less on any CR, whatever it is. I don't know how they're going to get around that. Senator, just in the last 30 seconds, though, this is your first year in the Senate. I keep forgetting that because you're so good at it. Are you having fun as a first-year senator? Is this the most fun you've ever had in your life, sir? Really?
Listen, I feel incredibly blessed. I feel incredibly blessed. It's an honor of a lifetime, Larry. I really do.
Well, but
I can tell you the conversations I have back in Missouri are often very different than the ones in Washington. So I try to bring that show me state common sense to the table in D.C.
I bet they are. Anyway, thank you for your service, Senator Schmitt. We really appreciate it very much. All right.